Well, welcome, Jacob, to the Leaders Who Care series. And no pressure, just have to prove that you really are a leader who cares. I mean, I know the answer to that, but you're going to have to prove it to all of them. Yeah, not really. It's going to be easy. Best way to start. First of all, super happy to have you here. And you got a lot to offer. We'll try to crunch as much into it as possible. But as they say in LA, you got to leave them wanting a little bit anyways, because that leaves room for a sequel after that. So that's what we'll do. But can you, and this is the part with men especially, can you briefly introduce yourself? And I'm talking about nothing business. Jacob, where you're from originally, where you are now, family. You want to tell everybody your favorite color, that's fine. Maybe something you've never told anybody before you want to reveal now, that's cool too. But share a little bit.
Yeah, no, and Mark, thank you so much for having me on this platform, and really excited to just share my story and have some fun back and forth. And so yeah, a little bit about me. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Was born in 1984. So had the pleasure of growing up in Atlanta during the mid 90s, which I say put that city and decade, compared that against any other city and decade, and I feel like Atlanta would match up. And yeah, so I grew up there. I have an older brother, an older sister. I'm the youngest, and definitely played that role growing up in a lot of ways. But yeah, my dad worked at Georgia State University for about 30 years, and so as I'll say later, that time period was a major influence, not only for how much he traveled, but also when I decided to get into education. And he retired from Georgia State in 2000, and because he had been in the state of Georgia for 30 years, they had a great program there for the state. And then got a job offer at Texas Christian University, which moved us out to Texas. And so we moved to Texas in 2000, finished high school in Texas, went to TCU.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Your parents still around?
Yes, yeah, no, my parents are still around. They're still in the same house in Fort Worth that we moved to in 2000. Actually heading back there to see them tomorrow.
Oh, all right, Lone Star, nice. Do you have family yourself?
I'm a bit of a lone wolf.
Lone Star, that's what I just said, Lone Star, okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a theme really throughout my life, and I think that you know I'm I love being around people, and I love having deep and strong and healthy relationships, but I also really enjoy independence and my independence and the freedom. And I feel like, especially at this point in my life where there's a lot of building involved and a lot of excitement, you know I've really focused on me and spending time making sure that I'm whole and ready in this new chapter before potentially walking with someone else.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I could relate. I've been married for a number of years and then single, if you will. And space is wonderful a lot of times. Space is a wonderful thing for yourself, your own growth, and being able to have whatever you want to have for dinner. It could be potato chips with cream with cheese or something. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But with respect to that, growing up, you talked about before, what were you like as a kid, a teenager? Were you like a big reader or doing hikes? Were you the lemonade stand entrepreneur or sports, music? What?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like a mix of everything. I've always just been very, very curious, interested in other people's interests and having as many experiences as possible. And so, like as a kid, big into sports. I played soccer and baseball growing up. Also played in middle school, played the trumpet.
Oh, wow.
The idea and it still sort of drives me, and not in like a arrogant way, but the idea of like a Renaissance man was always something that really drove me. I had a class in sixth grade just talking about this with a friend of mine that dove into, Greek and Roman mythology, the history of Egypt, learned how to really take notes and study, but also just really discovered a lot about myself and what the way that I think, and using those classics from the past to see what you can learn, and how you can apply that thinking or those philosophies or those mythologies to your life. And was sort of a knucklehead. I think that
You were a knucklehead?
yeah, I still am. Still am. I like to think of myself as I was like a bit of like a light warrior, meaning that I had some fire in me, but it was I tried to lead everything I did, at no matter the age, with mutual respect. And so if I put respect out into the world, if I put respect to a teacher or an adult or a friend, and that wasn't returned, it was hard for me to balance that, because I feel like not only I'd sort of live by the golden rule. I wanted to treat people how I wanted them to treat me, and that didn't always work. And so
Yeah.
uh, I would have an issue with reacting, and so sometimes that got me in trouble. But a lot of it was due to especially with sports, being fair and just and sticking up for people. And I think that I always wanted to stick up for people that weren't able to stick up for themselves, and often that got me into the principal's office or in trouble with coach, which in essence sort of caused me to dim that light a little bit, and take a step back from that sort of light warrior side of me, because I kept running into the challenges associated with it. It didn't serve me as well as I thought it would.
Yeah, even though the intent was sincere, if that's the consequence, you start adjusting a little bit. But you've been great on a hockey team as the enforcer. Then I'll tell you that, right then and there. Well, let's look at your journey a little bit. What intrigued you then to take that educational path first in geology?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story in of itself. I'd always loved being outside. My family and a group of other families, every January would go up to North Georgia or North Carolina, the lower Appalachians, and we'd stay in some cabins, and that's where not only hiking with other families, but I'd go out and do some trailblazing on my own, and just I always had a strong connection with nature. And I started out studying journalism in school because I really wanted to do something with sports. Like, another thing as a kid is like my head would be in baseball stats, all day. I would open the paper, and I would be looking at every single box score,
Did
comparing,
you did
contrasting.
you ever hear of the game Stratomatic?
I didn't know.
I played that as a kid. It was all baseball stats up the wazoo before computers. Cards had all the stats. You have to do the strategy and everything. You look it up. You will love that game. I think it's still around.
Nice. And were you an Expos fan, by the way?
Big time. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So
Love
we
that.
had some big rivalries back in the day. But so when I got to college, I was thinking, all right, journalism. I'd love to do something with sports. I love writing. Um, and I think in college, uh, and this is, you know, experiences have been a major influence, an influencer in my life.
Mhm.
And as I knew that I would do fine academically, because that was something ingrained in us as in our childhood, as C's
Sure.
are failing. And so I was thinking, all right, like, let's try something that I think that I would really love. And got to the point where I needed to schedule the grammar, spelling, punctuation test to move forward in the major. And I was like, maybe this doesn't really sound like my cup of tea. Like, I didn't love that. I didn't love English in high school and all of that. And so, uh, took a little break and some time. And I was in a fraternity, and one of my fraternity brothers, his dad was a geologist at an oil and gas company in Oklahoma. And my friend was switching from business to geology. And we talked about it, and I was like, I dig rocks. I like outside. And so gave it a shot. And I think the complexity of geology as a whole, especially that intro course, captured me, but also the professors, the energy that they had, and the passion that they had. I
Plus,
loved
it seemed,
going.
sorry to interrupt, it
Yeah,
seemed like, I mean, you're into nature, so that seemed like a no-brainer almost, and being outside and all that. Moving ahead a tiny bit, describe your experiences as I guess it was called a development geologist. What did you see? What did you learn? And then how did the decision come about to then go back into teaching, science teacher? I mean, it looks like not surprisingly, it looks like you were an innovative teacher. You were grounded, not to be cute. You were grounded with geology, but there was also the background of your father, the background of your friend and his father, the power of STEM that was probably inside of you, future city activity that you were involved in. I mean, all this stuff, and we'll talk about this a little bit more after, and conflict resolution. But it's quite a change from geology, except the way I looked at it is you're still doing excavations and discovery.
yeah. And still some field work too,
Yeah.
as a teacher. But you know, as a geologist, the one thing that when I was thinking about common threads throughout my career with geology and teaching, and the diverse path I've taken the last few years, it's really about correlating and connecting. And what I loved about, I'm great with pattern recognition. I've always been, have a good eye for recognizing similarities and patterns. And geology, like as a geologist, we were looking at the data that was taken from the borehole, upwards of like 50, 60 years ago, and being able to connect and correlate and create these maps from data that's 10,000 to 15,000 feet below. That was so fascinating to me. And also just um, the risk. I think there was a balance of risk that I think excited me, but also scared me. And um, the risk of you're given at times a really big budget, and you're saying X marks the spot based on my map, my analysis. And if X doesn't mark the spot, that's $5 million, $6 million potentially lost. But that's the name of the game, and there's comfort. You have to have comfort with that.
I find it interesting because before you were talking about Egypt and back then, and 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 then finding a rock or something deep, deep, deep down, and looking at where did all this derive from, and that's what I'm hearing. And I found one of the most interesting educational things is studying where are things derived from, language and culture and everything. And you're kind of talking that even back to when you were talking about Egypt. Um, and I mentioned excavation and discovery. There seems to be that theme there for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And, with geology, I think if I look back at that career and that time, especially in doing oil and gas, there was uh, so many experiences and lessons learned. Like, for example, communication and communication skills with, me being somewhat of a rarity. I mean, I'm slightly more progressive than the people that I worked with. And so that led to really harnessing the power of finding that common ground, and working through differences to create solutions together. But uh, had some really awesome experiences too. Worked in had covered some fields in southeastern Kentucky, so that gave me the ability to travel to really rural Appalachia and talk to people there, meet people there. But the inner, environmentalist and inner lover of the earth in me, there was always that tug of war about, like, this is a job, this is a career, like I need to, be in this, and this is going to be my career for the rest of my life. With this doesn't fill my cup, and there's every day there's some uncertainty, like, is this for me? And so that also limits your ability to grow, I think, within a career. And so in 2016, it was after a few years of low pricing environment. um, I worked for a private company, and so they were able to withstand while there were a lot of other layoffs in the industry during that time. And so February 2016, it's funny you mentioned the airport story earlier. After getting stuck in the Denver airport for 24 hours, uh,
You're like
came back.
Tom Hanks in that movie, whatever that
Yeah,
movie's called.
yeah, came back, and they announced that, hey, the next day we're gonna have layoffs. And Mark, like, deep down inside of, like, I was like, I sort of want this. I want this. I want to be one of those. And I was, but it was a shock. Because in my head, I was like, I'm done with oil and gas. Like, this is my forced exit, that I needed. I think that I was comfortable. And what am I gonna do next? And so that sort of kicked off this period of exploration, that year, from February really until through the summer. I took a road trip up to Glacier National Park. It's a big thing with me, or road trips and being outside, and was spending a lot of time with friends and talking with a lot of people about what's next. And this was the first time I really looked deep within. I was like, what am I good at? What are my core skills? Relationship building, working with the youth, you know, being able to work and manage a lot of different types of personalities. And teaching was also something that I always wanted to pursue. I remember back in fifth grade, uh, when other people voted on what they thought you were going to be, I was either a teacher or a lawyer. My brother took the lawyer position, so uh, and why I chose middle school was because, growing up in Atlanta public schools and seeing the whole spectrum, at the schools I went to, middle school was such a tipping point for so many kids to go one way or the other. And I wanted to make sure that, I was having a science background, coming from private sector, bringing some of those lessons into the classroom, but also being someone that genuinely cares, and students could see that I cared about them.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal because young people especially are very perceptive if you really do or not, or it's a bunch of BS. You know, it's fascinating. The fourth industrial revolution is effectively about, AI, technology, VR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that infamous, that they say that the fifth one is could easily be called about humanity. And at our firm, Fifth Element, we focus on the intersection of impact and talent to have any type of enduring, sustainable results. You talking about all your experiences, and you mentioned about working with people and stuff you learn. Sometimes you learn stuff that you didn't even think you were going to learn, but you'll learn in many ways, thank goodness. Share with us how your diverse experiences, the knowledge you gained about people and technologies, about partnerships and community, have now led you to the unique position and the opportunity of, is it Kilimo or Kilimo?
Kilimo Collective, yes.
Kilimo
And
Collective. So first of all,
yeah,
where did the name come from? And what are you offering and sharing with respect? We talked about where things are derived from. This is the full circle. They were derived from all the things you just talked about to where you are now. So where did the name come, and what are you sharing, and how has it been impacted by all that?
yeah. So Kilimo's meaning, and this was it was a little over a year ago. And so Kilimo's meaning is agriculture in Swahili. And so my initial goal, with Kilimo Collective was really centered around regenerative agriculture, collective impact, bringing organizations, whether it's nonprofit or social profit or
Good
for
job.
profit, yeah, bringing them together, but all that operate with a different sort of niche. Uh, Having them under one roof, one umbrella, where they can communicate, from start to finish for whatever project or program they're working on. And so, in terms of now it's sort of broadened beyond agriculture, but I'm still cultivating ideas, cultivating connections, um, relationships. But so in terms of thinking about this evolution towards more human-centered progress, I feel like that's something I've been waiting for my entire life. I think that's something, uh, I've always been very human-centered. And um, you know if I think back to, and I've had a lot of time to reflect, and because I've had hundreds of conversations over the last few years with leaders and um, you know, all different types of people. And there are some that where when they look at a career path like mine, they're like, that's chaos. You're just sort of bouncing around like a pinball. But for me, it's always been a constant search to find purpose. And I think for the longest time, it was just, I was caught up in other aspects of my life, or too busy looking outward and not understanding and loving and respecting what's within. And so with geology, thinking about earth systems and really understanding systems at that scale and the dynamics, the energy, being able, I tons of time presenting in front of leadership at a young age. And so um, you know that those skills, real hard skills that helped sort of set up a strong foundation. And then teaching, it's really about human systems and understanding social systems and the community as a whole. A, a catalytic. I wrote this down in my notes. Is like if the Nonflict workshop was 1A, this culturally relevant teaching workshop that I took during my teaching career is 1B. That was a profound experience, and really is what developed my passion and knowledge and respect for community-led development. But thinking about it in a classroom sense, to get especially the best out of my students, I had to know where they were coming from and find ways to bring relevant and authentic education to them.
Isn't it amazing that I compare a lot of things to sports, and I've coached a lot of kids. If they know that you're listening to them, if they know that you're open to them, and at the same time, you're not talking to them like babies, you're talking to them like people that are real people. They'll actually see and feel that you're trying to make them the best they can be. And we all need that. We all need that. And you call it human technology, but I find it fascinating. Talked about Egypt, we talked about geology, we talked about ag. This is all about digging up and where things derive from and harvesting it to grow better things in people.
That's so true. And going back to teaching and that experience as a whole, like that is what illuminated my purpose in the first place. I was going back and looking at some of that first year. Was, I'm telling you, like, especially that first day I entered the classroom, and it was like a deer in headlights. I'm like, what? these kids are looking at me to lead them on this educational journey. And
Was there a
but
whoopee cushion on your chair or something like that?
no, there's a couple tacks. Yeah. But you know, as tough, I had some really tough kids. I had one class that you know, I remember having to call the principal one time and being like, "Hey, can you come talk to me after school?" And because it was I was giving everything, giving my all. And she's like, with the kids that you have, 8 out of 10 new teachers would have been out the door by October.
Yeah.
And as hard as that still was to hear, it gave me strength and confidence in what I was doing. And what gave me even more confidence was the love and letters and feedback I received from students. And what they put in, I put directly back into them. Like I would, at the end of each semester, I'd write a handwritten note about the positive things that I saw in them and the exciting things and how that could translate into future skills.
Have,
um,
have you ever seen the movie Mr. Holland's Opus?
yeah, it's been a while, but yes.
Yeah, I cry every time. I just said it
Mm,
publicly.
mm.
Every time.
Hey,
And because teachers are some of the ones who most never see all the impact that they make and all the people that they touched, and sports coaches too, especially at a younger age, where I noticed especially men, could be one incident that happened where the coach put them out in a critical moment. They may not have scored or anything, but the coach put them out in a critical moment, and they hang on when the guy was 12, and they hang on to that as somebody. You always have to have somebody believing in you, and you can take that forever and ever. One thing you mentioned before was one of my favorite topics is Nonflict, not just because, but we have to learn how to engage with each other better. There's going to be obstacles, there's going to be conflicts. Those are good things because they're different ideas. So you recently did become certified in Nonflict, peacemaker. Tell us how that further supported your previous instincts, and it was the foundation for you to come to where you are now to get things done, and how it can make a difference for the people that you're going to be helping out: visionaries, business entrepreneurs, corporate leaders, government leaders, families, communities. Long question, I know, but tell us what your thoughts are on that.
yeah, and I love how you added in that instinctual part, because I think for like I told you before, in middle school, I was voted as a peer mediator. And um, that's really where I even though I've sort of lost my way in thinking about that skill. I think I played distracted playing sports in life. But I had that ability to whether it was using humor or just actively listening, to lessen conflict and bring people back together. And so, but I think one thing that's kept me from flourishing in a lot of ways was that it's just instinct. And what helped with the Nonflict workshop was this whole instinct to framework. Nonflict sort of expanded on those tools and gave me those tools to elevate that ability strategically. And thinking about what I do, you know everything, I feel like we're moving towards where, I love this quote: collaboration is the new competition. You know, it's about relationship building, and it's about people want authenticity, and they want to know that they can rely on people and trust somebody. And that's what I see Nonflict being able to create is dialogues that allow for that to happen more fluidly. And one thing that, through all the conversations that I've had in just life, and reflecting about life and people, I think awareness is a skill that really could be enhanced. Not only self-awareness, but awareness of others and how others perceive you. I think what I see Nonflict as leading to, in a lot of ways, is self-actualization.
Mhm.
Um, and an interesting, like, if we're thinking about like my work and how I can use this in day-to-day operations, thinking about it in terms of efficiency, like for economic impact, with Nonflict, with this methodology, there's less wasted time, there's less friction. This translates to better resource allocation and streamlined problem solving. And then for social impact and a lot of things, it's about trust. And I think
Sure.
non Nonflict's focused on building genuine trust is what will allow progress to happen, because what we need to switch, and I think there needs to be a paradigm switch. Instead of just leading with solutions, we lead with conversations where we can, whatever problem or challenge we're running into, what is the whole ecosystem? Let's talk about it. Let's see how we're impacted, and focus it in what we can control, positive framework,
Great point.
positive outcomes, and how can we get there? And what is that? I love what does that look like? Visualize the facts and the feelings. As you're storytelling, as you're sharing stories, you can find relevance to anyone, whether they live next door or lived across the world. And so that's what I love about Nonflict, is it creates bridges. It if there's not a clear bridge, if you really respect the progress, a bridge will be built, and thus progress can occur.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it that way. It's really true. And you also said a keyword there is framework. It's just saying we'll work it out doesn't usually get you to the place. If there's a framework of how you can go down the path and work it out in the process, and you're listening to each other, you just get something way more than, and there's no one's wrong. No one's wrong, type of thing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think we will have to have a sequel, because I only have time for one more question, but it's one I like also. It's in 2021, a client told me about 2020, the pandemic year. He said to me, Mark, 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought, what a great line. And it sometimes feels like it was last week, and sometimes feels like it was years ago. It's kind of one of those weird things. With all that said, what are you most grateful for as here we are deep in the throes of 2024 now, and what are you most hopeful for?
Oh man, that's a really good question. And yeah, I'm right there with you in terms of just being able to measure time, since 2020. And since then it's been a road, a bumpy road, and personally and professionally for me. And I think what I'm most grateful for are the challenges that I experienced, and the people that allowed those challenges to happen, or not. Because I think what I did is I switched to a mindset of gratitude. And what that allowed me to do is, like, you know, I see everything as a lesson, good and bad. And I did that before, but I felt like I focused it too much in a negative framework on what I did wrong, or what I wasn't doing enough. And so I think what I'm most grateful for is gratitude, and for all of those challenging lessons, because it helped awaken me, and really unleash me, because
Yeah,
I
it takes the burden off a little, doesn't it?
yeah.
What are you most hopeful for?
What I'm most hopeful for is a bright future. I think that is something I also found, is optimism. And through all of the conversations I've had with people all over the world, there's a sense of hope. And there's a yearning for connection and community. And to me, that's the first step. And our communities right now are so fragmented, that if we can rebuild at the community level, everything else will begin to fall in place. And I know it's not that simple, but you know, that's
But it is.
yeah, and Nonflict with the energy that y'all have right now and the momentum, that gives me hope because this is a practical way to solve complex problems, and thus making them, you know, not that complex. Because when you really break it down and talk about it in this type of way, you see like, hey, we can solve this. We can do anything. And so I think that people give me hope, and uh, you know, interventions like Nonflict and some of the other leaders, innovative and imaginative leaders I've met. There's so many brilliant and bright and excited and passionate people of all ages, and so I think
You're right. Of all ages. We just posted our first youth one at 10 years old.
yeah,
You know, it's everything, all ages. You said another keyword there too, in conflict rate, but another keyword is imagination. And I think you're right. People, the majority of people are craving just being able to be and having great lives. And so the more of us that can do that. And I'm really grateful for you being a leader who cares. You're a really authentic person. And I think that's what people draw to. And I'm hopeful for that, all what you talked about, that we start all coming together and just do great things together. So thanks for being on the series. Really appreciate it.
no, thank you for having me, and looking forward to part two, whenever that day comes around. Well,
That
I
might be
definitely
that might be the co-hosting part two.
all
So
right, and definitely have a few more tricks up my sleeve to share.
I love it. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mark.